Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. My name is Clint, and we have made it 25 episodes here on the podcast web, and we appreciate you for coming back and listening to what we have to say about dirt track racing in our state. This week, we are back on the phone with another racing personality who is a key player in the Ohio dirt track world. The All-Star Circuit of Champions brings the sprint cars through Ohio multiple times throughout the summer. And we have Series Director Eric Walls on the phone with us this week for an exciting interview, and we are very excited to get to it. First, I want to say thank you to St. Pete District Studios, as always, for hosting us and giving us this great sound that you're able to listen to our podcast with. If you are in need of any sort of recording, commercial, music, podcast, whatever it is that you need, please reach out to robinrecorder@gmail.com and let them know what you would like assistance with, and they'll make sure to get you taken care of. So thanks to St. Pete District Studios for hosting our podcast. Also, we do still have some apparel left. If you're interested in hats, just reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook and let us know, and we'll make sure to get one out to you. Starting to see more and more of those around the racetrack. And please share our social media as you see us on the Facebook, as we post our episodes on Facebook. Make sure that you share that with your friends and get that word out so they can listen to the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. Look for our comments on Twitter, like and share. And as you're listening, if you subscribe on iTunes, as you're listening, make sure that you give us a rating there so that we can reach more listeners. iTunes wants to know what you are thinking about what we have to say. So give us a rating on iTunes. Without saying anything further, let's go ahead and get on the phone with Mr. Eric Walls, Series Director for the All-Star Circuit of Champions. Okay, we are here on the phone with Eric Walls, Series Director of the All-Star Circuit of Champions. Eric, many sprint car fans know of Eric Walls as a Series Director, but I want to talk a little bit about the life events that kind of led up to you having this position. I know that you worked at speedways in the past, at Lincoln, at Williams Grove, before you came into these full-time positions with the All-Star Circuit. Where does your racing background start? Was there something in that career path that led you in this direction? How did you chase this career down?
Really, you could say that it was a combination of both. As a kid growing up, my cousins raced late models, limited late models and super late models at Hagerstown Speedway, Winchester and those. And at a young age, my mom was very much into the racing scene, and I kind of just grew up in it. When I got to the point, I would say probably 13, 14 years old is when I really wanted to start wrenching on things, and just the neatness of how a race team worked. And my family's racing operation was it was a strictly volunteer deal, and it was just neat to see how many people were involved in it. Back in the early 90s is the time frame of that. And it really sparked my interest. And then as I got older and I had gotten married and started a family, then my uncle got into the 270 micro ranks, and that's where I had always seen sprint cars at Hagerstown. You know, they would come down there for the Oktoberfest when we would race there, and different things, and it was always a neat event. And a sprint car was very intriguing to me, with the open wheels and, you know, the open cockpit and the big wing on top and everything. And it was just a very neat race car to me. And once he got into the 270 micros, which, you know, most people know that it's just a miniature version of a sprint car, suspension and torsion bars and stuff all work the same on those as they do the full-size sprint cars. And I had purchased one and raced myself for 5 or 6 years, and got one career win under my belt with a wingless deal. And I was like, I took a couple nasty rides, and at the time I had 2 young kids, and I thought to myself, you know, this is just a hobby for me. I don't know that I need to be doing this anymore. So I kind of sold everything, and then kind of stepped away from racing a little bit, watched my younger cousins race their late models a little bit, and met up with a buddy of mine that I met through the micro ranks, a guy by the name of Steve Topper, and he worked at Williams Grove in Lincoln, and it just so happened that they had an opening, and he called me up, and he's like, hey, Friday night, come on up to the Grove and see if you're interested. And, the rest of the time was made relationships from there on with guys like Steve O'Neill and Alan Kreitzer and just promoters, Scott Gobrek and guys like that. And, I worked at the many different racetracks there in central Pennsylvania, and that's kind of how the All-Star deal come about.
How many years have you been with the All-Stars? I know you worked in tech before becoming series director. What's the total years that you've been working with them or out on the road with the All-Star series?
Everything started right in around March of 2015. I'd gotten a call after Florida, and then we come on full time after that.
So that's the past four years on the road. I guess 3.5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And we've this podcast started out, it's the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast, and we started out talking mostly about sprint cars, so we attracted mostly sprint car fans. But then in the middle of this summer, we jumped in and started talking about late models quite a bit. So we've attracted some late models fans. So I guess I should probably back up and mention that the All-Star Circuit of Champions is a 410 sprint series that travels from Pennsylvania out into, what would you classify as the Midwest, Eric, throughout the year?
We go as far as Knoxville, Iowa, Jackson, Minnesota. We cover 12 states, and our series kicks off in Florida with Speed Weeks. Usually we go to Volusia Speedway Park, and it's a great time of the year, especially up north. I'm originally from South Central Pennsylvania, so I'm now located in the Midwest of Indianapolis. So we all know what the winters are like up here. So we're considered snowbirds when we go down there, and it's a good 2 to 3 weeks for us to get out of the cold and go down and do something that we love very much.
So when you guys are on the road, the series frequently will have 3, 4, 5 races in a week. If it's a speed week, you might have 6 or 7 in a row. What's it talk about? Can you tell me about when you show up at the racetrack, you get to the facility the day of the race, what do you tackle first? What is it that you have to go after when you show up at a new racetrack on race day?
One of the first things that I do, actually before the day of the race, we try and make a phone call about a week before to the track promoters where we're going to race that following weekend. And I get some pertinent information from them as far as, pit gate times and stuff like that. And we put together a bulletin for our social media outlets. And plus we have an email list for our full-time teams just to give them that information up front, so nobody's surprised when they get to the gate, for a pit fee or from the technical side of things. We put on there if mufflers are required or anything that's gonna be out of the ordinary, so to say. We put into that bulletin. So even before I get to the racetrack, that's something that's going on through the week. But one of the first things that I do when I get to the racetrack is I try and introduce myself to the promoter. Especially if it's a new racetrack. But if it's a previous racetrack that we've been to, I get with the promoter just to see if anything has changed from a safety side, making sure that they didn't have any scoring issues or anything like that. That way, when our scorer gets there and gets set up, he doesn't have any surprise issues. And then basically, we have a command center, which is a 40-foot trailer. So I try and find a nice level spot and a good spot that all the drivers and crew can find it. And so that's where we do our pill draw and all the information as far as W-9 forms and for tax purposes and that kind of thing. It's all run out of this trailer. So to get that set up, and then as the day goes on, you unload the equipment and And we have some four-wheelers, and we have a side-by-side that we push cars off with. Especially it comes in handy if racetrack's short on some push trucks. And then after we get all that set up, then we lay out the advertising banners and kind of see where we're going to hang all that stuff. So typically a day starts, probably around 11:30 or noon. Right after lunch, we'll get everything set up, and by that time, usually around 5:30, 6 o'clock is when the driver's meeting is, and it catches you off guard. The day goes by really fast.
Then it's full on until 10:30, 11, midnight, depending on what the situation is.
Absolutely.
How many people are on your team? How many people travel with you during the season?
So the All-Stars have 2 full-time employees, and then we have 4 contractors that travel with us, and those folks are paid race by race, and they're a very dedicated employees because we ask them to show up every weekend, and they have a passion for the sport, and they don't look at it as a job, as well as myself and our other full-time employee. We look at it. It's not a job to us when it's something that we love. So it's certainly not work. While the hours are long, I don't look at it as work.
You also travel with you have a video crew in tow for many of the races as well, right?
Yes, Speed Shift TV is a contractor in themselves. We don't have much to do with that. They bring their own crew, but we're at their, we'll assist them in any way we can to help out their broadcast as well.
Jacob and I talked, my co-host who wasn't able to join us today, we spent some time talking about that a few weeks ago on the show, how we would frequently, it got to a point where when the Outlaws would go west and I was racing here and you guys were somewhere else, and we could go to a track in Ohio, possibly get home to catch part of yours on one broadcast and then the Outlaws on another broadcast, so we can watch 3 events in one night. And that's been a great Speed Shift's been a good ad for the All-Stars this year.
Yes, most certainly. I've gotten a lot of text messages from back home and from my friends and family that are still working at Williams Grove and Lincoln and different things like that, and they're all done racing for the night, and they're able to tune in as well. Or, a lot of the teams that are at the Grove, they're racing and they have their TVs in the hollers, and they're tuned in as well. So, the internet broadcasts are really great. And I'll be honest, whenever the Outlaws are out west, it's really nice for us to drive down the road because the iPad's up on the dash, and we're watching the races as we're going to the next racetrack. So it makes it nice.
So in your first full season as series director, there were a number of challenges, which all of us feel like you guys took them in stride very well. But you had a large number of rainouts, controversies surrounding some rule enforcement, overcoming obstacles of Ohio Speed Week. What kind of makeup does it require within a team and coordination with promoters to keep this thing moving forward? I guess one example you might specifically be able to talk about was Ohio Speed Week, which was an incredible feat that you guys pulled off.
Well, and it goes back to dedicated promoters, Jason and Kristen Flory, at Wayne County Speedway. They stepped up to the plate, and you talk about a gamble. Here's a guy that has a Monday date, and he's willing to take any other date, if it's not raining at his facility. And it just goes to show you how powerful social media is from the positive side of things. I believe that social media drove the people to, the races that week because of knowing where we were going and so forth. So, just the amount of time spent on the phone, just talking with promoters and just the cooperation of, one promoter, they all want to race. Speed Week is very important. It's a staple.